The more you read about history, the more you recognize that these assholes, they had their finger tilting the scales. They had their finger on the scales every single time through direct involvement or indirect involvement. We are going to watch together the Vox video that came out. Apparently, Gaza, explained. Now, I don't know what kind of liberal spice they're going to hit on this, because sometimes they're actually pretty good on their coverage. Other times, not so much. So let's take a look at this. I don't know how bloody this is going to be, by the way, chat.
We are putting a complete siege on Gaza. No electricity, no food, no water, no gas. It's all closed. We're fighting animals and are acting accordingly.
That was the defense minister of Israel, responding to the deadly attack on October 7th by Hamas, a militant group based in Gaza. Hamas launched rockets, killed over 1,400 civilians, and kidnapped close to 200 people. Within days, Israel bombarded the Gaza Strip, killing several thousand, wiping out entire families, and striking ambulances, border crossings, and residential buildings. At the same time, Israel told over 1 million civilians to leave their homes and
militant, not terrorist. I mean, that's the correct description. So
move south, warning them of an escalation of violence.
Right off the bat, that is, it doesn't have the political designation right there. So it's, you know, it's an honest assessment of the situation, I would say.
In the north. But Israel is bombarding the south too, leaving Palestinians trapped.
For as long as this conflict has existed, movement in and out of the Gaza Strip has been, to one degree or another, restricted. The Prime Minister of the Israeli occupation, Benjamin Netanyahu, he knows very well that people are not able to leave.
Yeah, it's a concentration camp, an open-air prison, if you want to call it that. I know a lot of people will say, well,
the Gaza Strip
prison implies that they did something wrong, but like, not really, right? I brought him here specifically so he can fucking tell you that no, open-air prison is an apt designation because not every single person has done something egregious and they're in prison for that reason.
And nobody should be in prison.
Yeah. Oh, okay, well, I don't know about all that. Even though I am wearing my crime is not a crime shirt today.
I do love that shirt. I want one of those.
This is, you know, I wore this for you.
Thank you. God bless.
Is the smaller of the two Palestinian territories occupied by Israel since 1967.
My great uncle's a paramedic, and from his experience in the 2006 Lebanon War, IDF really likes to go out of their way to bomb or shoot ambulances. Yes, they do. They like to go out of their way to do horrifying war crimes all the fucking time. If you read enough about IDF military operations, which I feel kind of weird even calling them IDF or calling these military operations, you realize that their retaliation always is like a pit bull. You know, like the common meme of pit bulls is that they just like they have lockjaw, they don't let go. It's kind of like that. I know that I had a pit bull. Before you yell at me, I love pit bulls, okay? But it is very
vicious creatures.
They're very lovable, but
vicious.
But it's basically like, it's always by design as horrifying as you can imagine. Whether we're talking about Sabra and Shatila, the massacres there, where the IDF forces allowed the phalangist, Christian nationalist, psychopathic terror militias to go in and like actually cut babies out of the stomachs of pregnant women and allow them to slaughter Palestinians across the board, which happened in Lebanon, by the way. It wasn't even in fucking Israel proper, at a refugee camp, as they shut off all of the corridors where people could fucking escape, or their endless bombing campaigns, or anything that they've done so far. Once you get a better assessment of like their operations, you understand that this siege on Gaza is not new. It's the same old policy. It's just they slowly but surely increase the fucking brutality every time.
This sliver of land, only 25 miles long and 7.5 miles wide, is home to over 2 million Palestinians, making it one of the most densely populated areas in the world. For the last 16 years, residents here have been living under a harsh blockade, that allows Israel to control the flow of electricity, fuel, food, water, and medical supplies, so they can dictate when Palestinians receive essentials and when they're denied.
A process in which they called putting the Palestinians on a diet to make sure that they're docile. This is something that Israeli officials have openly stated. They control the Palestinian diet and have said they call it they call it putting the Palestinians on a diet. They calorie count. Not only that, but the sieges that have occurred time and time again since 2005 have been considered by Israeli officials to be mowing the lawn. So the cutting the tall trees, or if you're familiar with like any kind of ethnic cleansing campaign in the contemporary history, you've heard all this terminology. You've heard all of these statements from people that inevitably have to answer questions in the fucking in the Hague.
Don't Palestinians also have access to like 1/10 or 1/8 the amount of water that Israelis have access to, or something like that?
They have aquifers. I mean, 97% of their water is toxic, and the only way that they can actually have water is by either paying Israel for the water, or by operating desalination plants. And Israel has a desalination plant, and Palestinians have a couple desalination plants that have been bombed. They cannot rebuild. Part of the reason why they can't rebuild it is because when they rebuild it, Israel will bomb it, and also because they can't get fucking concrete into Gaza. It's illegal. Cement is illegal in Gaza. Why? Because Israel says, well, they're going to build tunnel systems. Well, they've already fucking built the tunnel systems.
They might build hospitals that they have to bomb.
Yeah.
That control is rooted in violence and destruction that goes back decades. Before the establishment of Israel, Gaza was part of what became known as historic Palestine under Ottoman rule and later under British occupation.
It was so good under Ottoman rule. Let's be fucking real, dude. Bring it back.
In 1947, as the British prepared to leave, they left the fate of Palestine up to a newly formed United Nations, who voted to...
Every single crime, every single historic crime over the course of the past 500 years of history, 400 years of history, you can always fucking go back and point the finger of blame at the British, and you will be right, okay? The more you read about history, the more you read about global affairs, the more you recognize that these fucking assholes are... They had their finger tilting the scales. They had their finger on the scales every single fucking time, whether through direct involvement or indirect involvement. And America is simply a continuation of that imperialist mentality.
Divide Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state. Soon, Zionist forces and militias began to forcibly expel hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their land to establish the state of Israel.
They're not getting too deep into this, but if you want to understand the Nakba, I would say Deir Yassin is like one of the most horrifying massacres that there are still survivors from on both sides, both the Zionist brigades and also the Palestinians that escaped, that have recounted the horrifying experiences like brutal rapes, people getting thrown in wells, people getting thrown in ovens. And things of that nature. And the brutality of Deir Yassin basically caused this massive effect through word of mouth in every single Palestinian village from the river to the sea that made it easier for the Zionist brigades to then turn around and forcibly expel people from other villages. And the number in the Nakba was, of course, 700,000 Palestinians who left with their home keys and the deeds of their houses in their fucking pockets, thinking that they would be able to return, which they were never able to. This is a major point of contention. You see this? Oh no, Josh Androsky fucking, oh no, he resigned from his post Friday after. Wait, what did he say?
He was tweeting at
friend of the show, Josh.
Yeah, he was tweeting at the TrueAnon account, and he made a
what did
Auschwitz
he say
joke
about Amy Schumer?
Auschwitz joke.
Oh, he did. He made a bad.
Well,
he
it
made
was
a
bad. As
joke.
in, like, it wasn't really that funny.
Oh, really?
And also probably extremely tone deaf considering the moment.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm disavowing Josh Androsky, that vicious rabid anti-Semite.
He got fired for making a joke that wasn't funny.
Yeah.
Shit. Wait, I don't have any beef with this person. I'm sorry.
No, Josh is the man. He is very involved in Los Angeles politics.
Yeah, he's Jewish also.
Oh yeah, of course. Yes, Josh Androsky is Jewish. For those of you who don't know, do I condemn Josh? Oh, absolutely. It was a TrueAnon thread. Yeah, Yeah, I like that.
He was replying to racial Jake.
Here's the audacity that I personally love watching. Like oftentimes, like white Christian Zionists, they get so far ahead of themselves in their endless defense of Israel that they like literally start saying that like Jewish people are bad Jews. You know what I mean? Like where they're like, please, can you condemn your Jewish friends right now for their gross crimes of anti-Semitism? I'm like, I'm Muslim. You're Christian. You're asking me to yell at a fucking Jewish guy for the crime of being anti-Semitic and from your perspective. Like neither of us have a say in this conversation as hard as, you know, what he has to say. What the fuck's going on? It's the same principle behind like Germans literally fucking arresting Jewish Palestinian protesters. It's like, I've seen this play out before. You guys are getting a little too horny right now.
Well, that's one of my gripes with German people generally is, besides the Holocaust, is like modern Germans, they feel really bad about the Holocaust, I guess. But then they want to like police Jewish people on like making, you know, edgy.
Yeah, like the SDP
stuff, you know
chick,
I mean?
like the SDP lady who is fucking a Christian German woman who was like criticizing Bernie Sanders for his like what I would consider a tepid response to the ongoing ethnic cleansing campaign in Gaza, and she was like, "This is a bridge too far, sir."
I just don't. It's kind of funny.
I say SDP, sorry, SPD.
It's kind of funny that you'd be like, "We're the most sorry that we did the Holocaust, so you actually should feel bad because we're really sorry that we did it."
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like the fucking psychotic like German Antifa that like dumped pork fat. In a German bakery that was like housing immigrants or something, and like allowing some Muslim immigrants to hold like a seminar or something, and they were like, "Yeah, we're doing this. Like we're fucking we're doing this for the Jews," and it's like, what are you doing, brother? You know first of all, that shit ain't kosher either. Okay, to some Germans, this is hard. I get it. It's hard not to like hit the fucking Holocaust button, it seems, for some of you, but you gotta dial it back, brother. You're getting a little too comfortable, okay? Calm down. What the fuck?
It is enticing for them though.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. This is what I know. This is all I know. What do you mean? It's my culture. It's my culture.
I'm getting fired for sure.
Lol is incorrect, by the way. Germans are not ashamed anymore. AFD, and I keep saying it's not an overcorrection, it's genocide Butler. It's called Anti-Deutsche. It's a phenomenon that makes me want to... Oh, yeah, we have some German leftists in the chat as well. But
I'm sorry. I don't hate all German people. I love your Lederhosen.
Who?
Lederhosen?
Lederhosen? Oh, okay.
I've never been to Germany.
Really?
I want to go to Berghain. You know Berghain?
Yeah.
You want to go?
Bro, what do you... I've been to Berlin a bunch. Have you
been to Berghain?
I have not been to Berghain, no.
Let's go.
I have been to Germany a lot. And I'll tell you, it's very Turkish. So especially Berlin.
Germany is Turkish coded?
It's the largest Turkish diaspora outside of Turkey.
Really?
Yeah.
You know there's a lot of Turkish people in Worcester, Massachusetts.
I did not know that.
Just
why do you know that?
Because that's where I went to college.
Oh. Berghain is super overrated in my opinion. They're very stuck up and purist there. Yeah,
okay, sorry. I've never been. They're blaming me.
Well, anyway, there's for me, I don't like Germany. I feel like Germany is very bland. I'm sorry. It's not my favorite. Like I've been there a lot, and I know a little bit of German, but I don't even need to speak it in order to get around in Germany because literally everyone's Turkish. So it's kind of dope. However, I do find it to be quite bland. I don't like brutalist architecture either, which is my most anti-Soviet opinion, I would say. Do you like brutalist architecture?
I fuck with brutalism sometimes.
Okay. I mean, you can have it. Vienna and Prague are way cooler cities. Yes, Vienna is beautiful. I was about to say Österreich. I think Vienna is much. I mean, I don't know. I like Vienna. Vienna is cool. Red Vienna, baby. A lot of public housing there.
So we're going to Berghain. Okay, cool. Sick.
Anyway, yeah. Disgusting trash take. I'll tell you this as a man currently in a Soviet bloc apartment building. Not a single problem ever. I just don't like the aesthetics of brutalism and brutalist architecture all that much.
You like the
what?
Like a ranch kind of
not
like
necessarily
sliding doors. One
not
of those
necessarily
open concept houses like Chet and what are they from the they make the houses down in Austin, Texas. You know what I'm talking about? I'm trying to insult you, but I'm doing a bad job.
McMansions? Not really. I mean, I think that I think London is beautiful. I mean, nothing beats. I would say I love the Netherlands. I love Amsterdam, probably one of my favorite cities in Europe in general. I love Spain. Barcelona is incredible. You know what I mean? There are a lot of I have a lot of armchair urbanist takes. Okay, that many of the
you just don't like big public housing projects that provide stability and housing for large groups of people.
No, I do like it. I do like it. I don't like the aesthetics of it. I love the principle of it. I just don't like the aesthetics of it. That much is clear. I mean, I've hyped Red Vienna quite a bit here. It's like one of my major points of contention with American housing is in our understanding of the housing market here is that we do not have any social housing. I do not give a fuck if all matter of housing in America was brutalist and ugly and boring, but at least it was adequate for eliminating the problem of homelessness in this country, I would be perfectly fine and perfectly happy with that, So, yeah. Anyway, what the fuck were we? Oh, we were doing the Gaza video. I can't believe we just got derailed so aggressively.
I'm so sorry.
2 minutes and 52 seconds in. This is literally all your fault.
Internally displaced Palestinians fled to this narrow stretch of land that would later become known as the Gaza Strip.
So these refugees became refugees because they were pushed out of their towns and villages.
Yes.
Some of them literally live a mile away from what used to be their towns and villages.
Many others were forced to flee to neighboring Arab countries. Overwhelmed by refugees, these countries immediately declared war against the new state of Israel to support Palestinian Arabs. They eventually lost to Israel, but Jordan ended up occupying the West Bank, and Egypt occupied Gaza City and nearby.
This is also very important to understand. You want to give?
I think I know. No, it's not a hot take.
Well, give us your
I think that this is
perspective.
an important aspect of Israeli propaganda inside the history of Israel, which was this is also often sold as this thing that Israel was this weak and feeble power that had no support, and all of these big, bad, scary Arab states, came in and lost this war. But the reality was that they had tremendous support, and actually President Johnson was briefed on this, and so was McNamara, and McNamara told Johnson that they would get fucking washed, that Israel would wash Egypt and all these countries when they
I'm proud of you.
I'm just saying.
Okay, go on. Yeah.
No, so I'm saying this is an important aspect of it though, because this is often touted in part of the history and of legitimizing the Zionist project is this idea that they were valiantly defending themselves against this encroachment, but that really wasn't the case.
Yes.
It's an important. Yeah. Okay. Now you go.
Another aspect. Another aspect of this also is the reality that under no circumstance was this the will of the Palestinian people being represented adequately in almost the entirety of the history. In every single circumstance, whenever there was supposed to be some kind of deal making happening, especially leading up to the 90s, all the way up until the 90s. Most of these conversations were happening without Palestinians actually having a seat at the table. The PLO, just like Hamas now, was considered under similar circumstances a terrorist organization that was not allowed to be a part, to play a part in the conversations whatsoever. Their leadership was also, of course, assassinated regularly. So that's something that you have to understand here. While there was a voice for Palestinians that literally, regardless of what Israel claims in their propaganda, was 100% conciliatory, 100,000% conciliatory to the unjustifiable demands that this occupying force was making, okay, that their voices were regularly never heard.
Towns along these ceasefire lines. Then, in 1967, another war broke out. Amid Palestinian resistance and fearing threats from neighboring Arab countries, Israel launched a full-scale attack on Jordan, Syria, and Egypt. In just 6 days, Israel captured the Gaza Strip and the Sinai.
This was also a preemptive attack, and every single person involved in it, from military officials and also Israeli officials and even American officials, have said that Egypt had no way of engaging in like full-scale war with Israel. The preemptive attack was seen as this preemptive self-defense attack that completely wiped out the Jordanian and Egyptian air forces that were, not even in a defensive posture. They were just like sitting on their fucking airfields, not realizing that there was going to be an air raid. They wiped it out. 90% of the Air Force was wiped out, and Israel maintained its air superiority ever since. But this is seen as like the most important, I would say, military conquest, because it's like against state actors in the region. And it's like, I guess it's kind of like Israel's World War II. You know how like America uses World War II to justify all of the other military conquests that they engage in? This is kind of like that, where they're like, we had to do it, and we fucking won, and we showed everybody our military might, our superiority in the region, and that's and going forward, it's an important part of Israeli myth making, I would say.
Yeah, and I think also like what was wrapped up inside of this process at the same time, which you kind of mentioned before, was through every stage of this process, Palestinian voices were not really heard or prioritized or put out there in any way, and a lot of the state actors, especially in Jordan, like the king in Jordan had all these interests to kind of absorb, part of the land into Jordan, and was always undermining the interests of Palestinians who didn't want to actually be part of like that government, who didn't, the leadership there didn't like him.
The Jordanian occupation killed more Palestinians than the Israeli one did at the time for its duration. Like they, instead of fighting against like Israeli forces, they routinely squashed any kind of Palestinian uprising. And not only that, but also, I mean, this example is quite similar to even the Palestinian Authority. There's a reason why in contemporary Palestinian politics, people despise the Palestinian Authority, because it's seen as a part of the Israeli security apparatus. Because the Palestinian Authority collaborates with the IDF and gives up the names and places and allows Israel to conduct raids, for example, in occupied West Bank and places like Jenin. They are not seen as being on the side of Palestinians, but instead being on the side of Israel. And that is also by design. Israel had every opportunity throughout this process to allow the nation-state development, a just Palestinian nation-state developing with their collaborative project with the Palestinian Authority under Fatah, the secular regime that literally was anti-Hamas and fought against Hamas quite brutally, as a matter of fact. But they chose to not do that because they wanted to utilize the two-state argument as a way to continue engaging in land grabs, as I've talked about quite a lot. B'Tselem shows it by way of showing you the maps and how that occupation worsened, and the permit regime, the permit tyranny worsened over the course of 50 plus years.
From Egypt, the West Bank from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. This was the beginning of the Israeli occupation in Gaza that continues today. Israel took control of all movement from and to the Gaza Strip by land, air, and sea. It placed troops along this line and inside the Gaza Strip, and allowed Palestinians to travel between the Gaza Strip, Israel, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. But just a few months after the war, even though Palestinians now lived under Israeli control, they began to be referred to as non-citizens or foreign residents in official Israeli documents.
You inherit this status from your parents and grandparents, being stateless, unrecognized, with no rights. And, this impacts your life.
This was also when Israel started to build settlements for Jewish Israelis inside of Gaza. To Palestinians, this meant even more land being taken away from them.
And they were 100% right. So settlements inside of Palestinian territory that Israel occupied in Gaza and the West Bank was a deliberate design of the Zionist state. They did this specifically in identical terms, in identical circumstances, both in Gaza and also in the West Bank. They created settlements that they defended with the IDF, with the occupying force, that partitioned off, or at least tried to partition off areas where there was, a lot of Palestinians living there. Now, it was much more difficult to do so in Gaza because Gaza was so dense to begin with. Was so densely populated due to all of the internal refugees living in Gaza, but they very successfully did this in the West Bank over the course of 56, almost 60 years.
And they were being closed in. Israel did not allow Palestinians here to operate their own seaport or airport. Within the Gaza Strip, Israel developed key industries like agriculture to cater to Israeli and West Bank markets, taking advantage of Gaza's cheap labor market and paying Palestinians very little. These economic challenges led to the rise of a prominent Islamic social charity, Mujama al-Islamiyya. At the time, this charity, partially funded by Israel, built schools, mosques, clinics, and provided more food for Palestinians in Gaza. But tension simmered. Israel feared a growing resistance movement, and in response, soldiers often frisked, arrested.
This is really fucking good. I'm surprised at how incredibly well done it is, that down to like the inception of Hamas and how it became a violent resistance movement
and
as well.
Detained residents. In 1987, that tension reached a breaking point after an Israeli truck crashed into a civilian car, killing 4 Palestinians.
Yep.
Palestinians immediately responded with protests, strikes, and boycotts against occupation. It would become known as the First Uprising, or Intifada. And that same year, Mujama al-Islamiyya transformed into a militant group, Hamas.
Hamas was a group that came about during the first Palestinian uprising and was not really a part of institutional politics for some time.
They weren't in charge of Gaza yet, but they wanted to liberate Palestinian territories from Israel's control and considered Israel an illegitimate state. After the first year of the Intifada, during which over 140...
Remember, the first Intifada was fought with strikes and stone throwing, in which case the Israeli government, of course, always and forever responded with disproportionate force, opening up live ammunition fire upon these protesters. So that is really important to understand, because the second Intifada was a lot more brutal. And then the response from Israel, of course, was also a lot more brutal. But one thing that they haven't mentioned here that we talked about was the policy of bone breaking. Okay? 1/3 of the people protesting that were severely wounded in these protests were children. I think like an insane amount of children. And when I say children, I don't mean like under the age of 18. I mean literally 5-year-olds, okay?
40 Palestinians in Gaza were killed. Hamas and other militant groups began to attack Israelis
like
more directly.
Babies.
Then the Intifada grew more violent in 1991, which is also when Israel introduced a permit system that greatly restricted Gaza residents' ability to work, travel through Israel, or access the West Bank and East Jerusalem. By the end of the first Intifada, Israeli forces had killed over 1,000 Palestinians, and Palestinian militants had killed over 100 Israelis throughout Israel and the occupied territories. The uprising ended after the internationally brokered Oslo Peace Accords between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, or the PLO.
Yeah. big friend of the show, good guy, never done anything wrong. There's a lot more, I would say there's a lot more American involvement in the entire process here, all the way from Camp David to Oslo to every other step of the way. But that's, I feel like, too long to explain in a 15-minute explainer. So that's, it's chill, I would say. But America was involved every step of the way in this process, for those of you who do not know. And of course, our fucking leaders are stupid as hell, so they didn't know shit. And they also rarely ever factored in the Palestinian position in their dealings, and very much the competing interests on the American side, which had, of course, all of the influence, always revolved around, Christian, Jewish, Zionists that had a security interest and wanted to maintain a security commitment to, like, Israel maintaining its occupation. And then on the other side, you had people who were, again, Christian for the most part, that had trade interests in the Gulf states. So at no part was the Palestinian humanity represented in any of these conversations. It's important to recognize that, so you understand why the deal making the deal making never really featured, like, any of the genuine goals that the Palestinians had.
This was a liberation movement with an armed wing that fought for Palestinian rights for decades. The PLO agreed to disarm and recognize Israel's right to exist, but Hamas, which had very little political support at the time, strongly opposed it. The deal also created a new governing body, the Palestinian Authority, or PA, which allowed political parties and elections in the Gaza Strip. The PA was granted some autonomy within small areas, but Israel still controlled the territories.
By the way, I want to mention something here. At no point do these guys have a fucking standing military, okay? And the standing military is the occupying force, the Israeli occupying force. That's number one. And number two, they're still under brutal occupation, under brutal occupation where Israel still controls whether or not they even have elections. So if you, this is really important to understand, because as Nelson Mandela said time and time again when he was imprisoned by the South African authorities, they told him, we'll let you out of prison if you denounce violence and also Marxism, socialism, communism. And to which he always responded with, how can you negotiate with me when I'm enslaved by you, when I'm in chains? You need to let me out of prison for me to actually tell you anything, to be able to freely speak to you. And the same principle still stands for Palestinians. How can they have real elections if those elections are done under Israel's own censure program, Israel's own occupation? Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
What's up? What were you gonna say?
No, I would just also recommend people check out the speech that Mandela gave at the Rivonia trial. It's a really good speech. It was before he was sentenced, and I think it's worth reading. It's about the ANC and.
I mean, you're a public defender. You understand this better than anybody else. Like, you can't have fair and free elections under occupation when you're literally imprisoned. You can't have. You are still in the custody of the state at that point. Like,
yes,
you don't have any freedom. You don't have freedom of speech. You have a totally different set of standards where your humanity is robbed from you.
You're under duress.
Yeah, you're under duress. There's no way you can't consent to sex, for example, which is why it is under almost every single circumstance considered sexual assault. You have no way of consenting to engage in labor that is meaningful, that you personally want to engage with, and that's why it's still considered slave labor, and the wages reflect that reality. These are all very real circumstances for those who are incarcerated. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because, the entirety of the Gaza Strip and West Bank is basically incarcerated. You can't engage in contracts at that point. You can't have fair and free elections at that point if Israel controls all matter of media and also on top of that controls whether or not you can even have elections to begin with.
I think also not to mention the psychological toll of having an occupying force there that will kill you, that does kill your friends, family, loved ones regularly.
Yeah.
You're in a constant state of being in danger, which is a reality for all the people there.
Mandela also said, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." And he was right. Also, I'm going to run the 3-minute ad break now, and we're going to continue on with this video because you need to go soon, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'm just holding on to Alex here, not letting him leave.
And the flow through these crossings. The Oslo Agreement also promised Palestinians some level of autonomy and a path to statehood in 5 years. But that never happened.
Yeah.
Instead,
Nope.
what followed was more Israeli settlements on Palestinian land. And a year later, following an attack by an Israeli settler in the West Bank and a series of bombings by Palestinian militants, including Hamas, Israel's prime minister called for the construction of a fence around the Gaza Strip. Gaza now had a physical barrier between it and the outside world.
We'll do on-band
These
request when he
moves
comes
made
back.
Palestinians trust the Israeli government and peace negotiations even less, and it would lead to a second uprising. On September 28, 2000, Israeli politician Ariel Sharon visited Al-Aqsa Mosque, a Muslim holy site in Jerusalem that's largely inaccessible to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip.
Like Ariel Sharon is like is also again a very
war criminal,
a very important, very pivotal politician who was the guy responsible for Sabra and Shatila, the massacre that I talked about earlier in Lebanon. Okay, so much so that he was actually taken away from power by the Israeli authorities, even though he still, of course, maintained his prominent position. So, like, understand that Yitzhak Rabin, for example, who was assassinated, okay, who was fucking assassinated because he wasn't right-wing enough for the Freaks in Likud and also the Jewish Power Party, like Itamar Ben-Gvir, was the guy responsible in the first intifada for like the bone breaking policy, like break their hands, break their bones. Like none of these guys were good guys. Okay, they are not good guys by any standard.
And his name's Ariel, which is a girl's name.
Fucking got him, dude.
Go!
Let's go. I mean, you said it, not me. He's anti-Semitic. I disavow his anti-Semitism. Okay. Also, your name is Alex.
That could go any kind of way.
That's what I mean.
Gender is a construct.
Biden spoke at Sharon's funeral as though he's a respectful politician. I mean, Biden has eulogized many people. So he's an equal opportunity eulogizer where he went and did a eulogy for white supremacists too. All right.
This visit sparked widespread protests and violent clashes, resulting in Israeli forces killing 4 Palestinian children the next day. And Palestinian militants carried out suicide bombings. Back in the Gaza Strip, Palestinians broke down much of this barrier. The Israeli government soon built it back up and heavily militarized it with more troops and observation posts. They further canceled travel and work permits, restricting movement through this crossing even more, and eventually destroyed Gaza's only major airport and its under-construction seaport. By the end of the Second Intifada in 2005, Palestinian militants had killed over 900 Israelis, and Israeli forces killed over 3,000 Palestinians. The Second Intifada gradually came to an end as Israel dismantled all Jewish Israeli settlements in the Gaza Strip and withdrew the ground troops. Then
They not only dismantled the settlements in the Gaza Strip, but there were 10,000 Israelis, like 10,000 Jewish settlers living in the Gaza Strip. They did not want to leave, okay? And they were forcibly removed by the IDF. The reason for that is obviously clear because then they started their sieges over and over again. So understand that like this wasn't done, even though Israel presents this as like this fucking olive branch. Dude, shut the fuck up. I'm not reading your chat, okay? Here, there you go. Here, I got it. The democratic mindset of supporting the actions of Israel, Gaza, Iran, Iraq, etc. is a crime. We all have sacrificed too many tax dollars and war reserves to support this stuff. Got it, dude. Thank you. Thank you for your brilliant fucking analysis in the situation. Okay? That's it? That's what you really, really wanted me to read? I read it, okay? Thank you for your $20 chat. Jesus Christ. I mean, it's just like motherfuckers are out here being like, me. And then the thing that I want to hear, the thing that they want me to hear is like something that is just like fruitless.
Don't be mean to my sweet, sweet chatters.
Okay. Anyway, I forgot what I was saying. God damn it. Fuck. Okay, whatever. But yeah, there's a lot that gets lost in this conversation that is important to understand how horrifying the conditions are, even though this, while it's a short and sweet way to describe everything, it directly counters all matter of propaganda that you've probably heard that tries to desperately justify the current brutal occupying force that Israel is. But yes, the settlers did not want to leave.
Another internationally brokered agreement gave the PA control of this crossing with Egypt on the Gaza side and allowed trucks and convoys to flow between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. But Israel didn't let that happen. At the time of the first legislative election after the Second Intifada, Fatah, a party backed by the PA and PLO that had negotiated with Israel, was in power. But many Palestinians saw Fatah and its approach as ineffective. Hamas, which was now a political party.
The reason why Palestinians saw Fatah and its approach as ineffective was because Israel made it ineffective, okay? Because any kind of conciliatory action with Israel literally led to nothing, not even a fucking olive branch, nothing whatsoever. Just more occupation, more partitions in the West Bank, more settlements popping up in the West Bank that specifically and surgically cut through. So there was no contiguity in the West Bank for the Palestinians living there. It was just a loss of land and a more brutal occupation that removed all matter of fucking free travel from Palestinians that created the permit tyranny to begin with. So 1,000%. The reason why Palestinians were like, what the fuck are we doing? We try to like deal with you guys and we disarmed ourselves. We try to deal with you guys. And then you took our resistance and you personally neutered them and then basically turned it into a part of your security apparatus. Okay. This is very important to understand. And this was by design. Okay. This was deliberate. Not like deliberate in the sense that Netanyahu considered Hamas to be the most important way of thwarting any kind of Palestinian national movement, but it was by design in the sense that all matter of violence in the West Bank and all matter of continued occupation and the apartheid regime tightening its fucking grip on the necks of Palestinians and utilizing the conciliatory, collaborative Palestinian Authority as a way to do that would inevitably push people directly into the hands of a more violent means of emancipation, no matter how impossible it is to go up against one of the most militarized states with a fucking nuke, okay? That was deliberate. That is by design. They purposely, knowingly radicalized Palestinians. They had every opportunity to not do that. They had every opportunity to show Palestinians like, look, we are going to allow the Palestinian Authority to be a force for good, be a force for peace. In every single instance, in every single circumstance, the Palestinian Authority tried. Okay, they tried to meet Israel's increasingly worse demands over and over again, and it didn't matter.
In addition to being a militant group, won most of the seats in 2006.
People voted for Hamas as a way to express their disapproval of the ongoing status quo, which was that the peace process had failed and they had had two uprisings and no state was in sight.
In response to an armed militant party winning, Israel banned laborers from leaving Gaza for work. Then when militants captured an Israeli soldier, Israel carried out airstrikes in Gaza and tightened its control on the sea, limiting fishing capabilities to only 6 miles. Politically within Gaza, Hamas had won the election, but the PA was still the governing body, with Fatah under its wing. A conflict broke out between Hamas and Fatah, and Hamas seized power of the entire...
This is not a conflict. This was a coup. It was a coup because Fatah and the Palestinian Authority were collaborating with the American government. The election itself was only allowed to take place because George W. Bush wanted the election to take place against the best interest of Fatah, which told the American government we are not ready for an election at all. Okay? It wasn't even an Israeli coup. It was an American coup. This is not speculation. This is just really what happened, okay? Hamas won this election because in most circumstances there were multiple secular parties, multiple parties that were conciliatory to the Israeli position that wanted to continue on with a two-state solution that allowed Israel to basically keep maintaining their occupation and the violent grip that they had on the Palestinian people. Okay, and Hamas was like, no, fuck that. Hamas also ran on an anti-corruption campaign. Now, it's not even, and of course, the votes were split in many different elections amongst multiple secular people running for that same position against one Hamas guy usually, and they won by a slim margin. However, in the exit polls, which were conducted after, it was very clear that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians who still, even though they voted for Hamas, wanted a ceasefire and wanted to continue pushing for a peaceful solution. Okay? This is 2006. After the elections went in the direction that America had not foreseen it would go in the direction of, they then tried to do a coup d'etat. They tried to facilitate a coup d'etat with the Palestinian Authority, with Fatah party members, and they failed, which led to Hamas seizing control of the entirety of the Gaza Strip. And there's never been really anything ever since. There's never been any political movement ever since.
Entire strip in 2007. This is when Israel put Gaza under the official blockade that continues today, tightening Israel's grip over Gaza even more, trapping over 2 million Palestinians inside. This time, Israel closed the main crossing for commercial goods, made travel even more restrictive, banned exports from Gaza, and imposed restrictions on the import of essential items such as fuel, medicine, and food. They even used mathematical formulas to determine the necessary caloric intake for people in Gaza to control how much food they would allow in.
Basically, we live a slow death in Gaza, even before major escalations. People cannot travel freely. We have Israeli drones hovering around 24/7. There's always stress.
Over the next several years, reoccurring conflicts and airstrikes made the already devastating impacts of this blockade worse. Israeli airstrikes destroyed vital infrastructure, such as water and power plants. Repairs were delayed by the blockade, which impacted the delivery of construction materials. And for each militant attack on Israelis, Israel killed far more Palestinians in retaliation.
Operation Cast Lead, 2008-2009, 1,398 Palestinians were murdered, 14 Israelis. Operation Pillar of Defense, 2012, 167 Palestinians to 4 Israelis. Operation Protective Edge in 2014, 2,202 Palestinians to 72 Israelis. May 2021 conflict, 256 Palestinians, 13 Israelis. This doesn't even feature the 2018 March to Return, the peaceful March to Return that had no Israelis murdered, and every single Palestinian was shot at by IDF snipers that the IDF openly stated was accounted for. Every single bullet was accounted for. 10,000, I believe, were wounded. I mean, this is the violence is asymmetrical because one is a militarized state with a standing army and also nukes. The other one is a militia group that does not have access to even humanitarian aid without Israel's know-how, and at that point is trying to do is getting any kind of support from regional actors as they can, any kind of military support that they can get from regional actors.
Yeah, I just also want to add one of the reasons that I thought it was important I went to the first demonstration that had occurred a few weeks ago in New York City. That was like the demonstration that a lot of politicians came out and condemned, and they were saying these things about what had occurred at this demonstration because it was on the Sunday of that weekend. And, you know, besides because I was standing or expressing my solidarity with the Palestinian people, part of it was knowing that this was going to happen. What's happening right now, because of this history, because every time there was some kind of incursion in the past or clash, I know that it's always constantly met with, you know, 100 or 1,000 times the force by the IDF. And it was so apparent that that was going to happen. And I was honestly pretty disappointed and hurt, honestly, by some of the reaction to that. Do you know what I mean? Like, because being there at actually that protest, which had there were hundreds of people there, and people that friends of mine, people who are Palestinian, and the expression of that protest was not what was, I thought, an expression of anguish, knowing what was about to occur, knowing what was coming, and fear for their family and their loved ones. I don't know. Like, it was.
And what had taken place before that moment? Because, like, while Americans, the American media, Western media, and American politicians desperately try to make it seem like October 7 happened in a vacuum, like, October 7 was a violent retaliation to the ongoing occupation, the ongoing apartheid state. Okay? It's ridiculous to act like these guys are just like, they came out of nowhere, you know? And that kind of thinking is obviously productive if you want to, if you know that Israel is going to engage in more ethnic cleansing and you want to defend it, okay? But it's unproductive for the security interests of Israelis to begin with. And that's precisely why there are actual Israeli Zionists themselves who also recognize that the brutality in the West Bank was quite literally causing, or was going to cause, an incredible security risk.
At times, Israel would slightly lift restrictions, but it was never close to matching the humanitarian needs of Palestinians in Gaza. According to a UN report from 2022, the 16-year blockade had made 78% of the water in Gaza undrinkable, left 62% of Palestinians in Gaza in need of food assistance, living with rolling power cuts that last on average 11 hours per day.
That is our normal life. We would have 8 hours of electricity, 12 hours of electricity. It changes depending on the situation and the availability of fuel. We are completely dependent on Israel.
This is what many Palestinians and international law calls collective punishment.
Collective punishment is when cancer patients cannot travel because they get denied. And collective punishment means also that Palestinians cannot have their own hospitals and they cannot treat their patients. Collective punishment means the people of Gaza now are punished for the most recent escalation.
When we look at the crime of genocide, which is, the intentional destruction of a whole people in part or in whole, we are seeing elements of that crime being committed and carried out in the Gaza Strip right now.
There's equating between Hamas and all Palestinians. And this is not the first time that we're going to see people in Gaza and civilians in Gaza, half of whom are children, pay the price for Hamas or anything else.
Israeli and US leaders have emphasized that Israel has the right to defend itself by wiping out Hamas completely. But the majority of casualties in the Gaza Strip aren't Hamas fighters. They're civilians.
It's an interesting question to consider whether or not things would have been different if Hamas didn't exist. But the thing is, Hamas didn't exist until the late 80s.
And things certainly were not different.
But the occupation of the Palestinian territories has been since 1967. And the original Palestinian displacement was 1948. And Hamas didn't really emerge until much later than that. I think that anybody who follows Israeli and Palestinian politics, like with some level of honesty, knew that if what happened hadn't happened, something else was going to happen because the status quo was unsustainable.
The world has to recognize this suffering, even before we have escalations. The reason we have escalations is because people cannot find any hope.
No one wanted to get to this point. The tragedy of it all, in my mind, I think besides the loss of human life, is that it was preventable, easily.
all of this that you watched is the reason why I find it fucking ridiculous when people go, oh, religious differences. It's so obvious. It's like, this is a religious war. It's like, no, it's not, dude. What are you, fucking stupid? It has nothing to do with religion at all, okay? Religion is simply a rallying call, but ultimately it has nothing to do with the conflict in and of itself. Ridiculous, okay? That's why I also say the greatest way to rid Hamas of any kind of influence it may have is by doing the exact opposite of what Israel has done in perpetuity. Genuinely treat Palestinians with fucking dignity. Offer them assurances. Stop stealing their fucking land. Give them their land back. Offer them a right to return. But of course, the moment where we start talking about that, immediately people start hitting me with blood and soil arguments that like, well, the Palestinians, they're going to come back and then they're going to outrank us. They're going to have more people and we can't have that. We can't have more Palestinians than Israelis because then they'll do genocide. They'll do genocide back to us. So that's why we have to keep maintaining genocide in this way that we're doing. And that's just like, I don't know how to deal with that because that's a fucking racist ass argument that the idea is that like Palestinians are going to wipe out all Jewish people from these lands if they can participate in the democratic process is insane. It's an insane idea. You cannot justify ongoing ethnic cleansing because of possible hypothetical ethnic cleansing that may occur down the line that you have no basis for stating will happen. You know, right? What do you think historically?
I think it's heavy shit, man.
Read a lot. You read a lot about this issue. I want to hear your perspective.
I think that, you know, I see it in terms of the work that I do every day, which is that the people who I represent are dehumanized, are treated as scum, and are presumed to be monsters. And the truth is, like, obviously they're not that, but they've also been failed by a system that, you know, creates a situation where they're in these horrible situations. And I think it's the same. People are fighting for their humanity. They're fighting to be seen as human, and they deserve, you know, dignity and respect and a life, like, which is what all people deserve. And sorry, it just makes me upset.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's this like fundamental disconnect I feel, and I realized it. Sorry, I don't want to be overly sentimental. I represented this person one time who had been in jail for like 40 years, and so they had been through the system for a long time. And I'm just trying to connect it to this, and I don't normally let my clients speak in court because it's not good for them. You know, they'll say something and they'll incriminate themselves. But we were trying to get him out of custody, and he really wanted to say something. So he asked the judge if he could speak, and he gave this very inspiring speech, and he talked about his life and how he lived on the street, but that he, at least when he was on the street, he was free. He wasn't incarcerated. And what I realized in that moment was it was such a foreign concept to me, like that someone could live this life, the majority of their life incarcerated, and just a horrible, tortured life, but still feel like, wow, being out on the street and looking up at the sky, like, that's free to me. And I realized that the disconnect that existed, that disconnect and my lack of understanding of that allowed that world, like that disconnection allowed his world to persist in that way. And so I feel that our disconnection, the American disconnection to the plight of the Palestinian people, allows this to continue.
Yesterday,
so
someone who
recognizing the humanity that is implicit in their existence is required of us. And I think, so to what you're saying, I think it's gross. But I also don't think it's true, and I have more faith in people. I think people just want to be treated like human beings.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for going on and on, but...
No, not at all. No, this is very important to hear. Volibear Zelansky says, I think it's a very relevant quote for the replacement theory as concerns. The cruelties of property and privilege are always more ferocious than the revenges of poverty and oppression. For the one aims at perpetuating resented injustice, the other is merely a momentary passion soon appeased. And the greatest way to appease that momentary passion, that violent retribution, the revenge fantasies that may or may not exist, is by allowing them to succeed in their ultimate goal, which is emancipation. There has never been a time where this kind of violent retribution has literally occurred. It has not happened. It's not like it didn't happen in Nazi Germany even. There is no reason that people would behave in the same exact ways that they are currently being subjected to.
I'm just not that cynical. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have more faith in humanity. Also, I think it belies a guilty conscience because you know what you're doing is fucking evil.
Yes, exactly. That's why, like, whenever people say
evil.
from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Like, when people say that, and then those who want to defend Israel go, "That's genocidal rhetoric. That's genocidal rhetoric." I can tell that's genocidal rhetoric. It's like, no, that's projection.
Right.
That's fucking projection.
Right.
Emancipation for Palestinians and a recognition of their humanity does not mean like every Jewish person living in Israel proper will be forcibly ethnically cleansed.
Yeah.
You just live in that violent universe right now, so that's all you know, and you've developed these paranoid delusions.
I don't try to, and I would never try to speak to the entire Jewish experience. It's impossible. It's so diverse. It represents so many different people and points of view. But I will say I think there is a thread in the modern Jewish experience, and especially in the American Jewish experience, which is that Jews have been hated for a long time, which is true. They've been historically chased out of places. That's my heritage. Pogroms in Russia, chased out of here and over there. My dad, when he was young, he grew up in Scarsdale. He got the shit beat out of him because he was Jewish. That stuff is real. It's real. But that doesn't entitle you to, first of all, I think, be so cynical in your outlook on the world that there's someone waiting behind you, behind every corner for you. And I think you also have to recognize your own privilege when you're a fucking American living in the United States, living a perfectly stable and fine life. And I think it also calls upon you to recognize when things are being done in your name that are horrid and evil, fundamentally evil. And like, we need to stand up for those, against those things, you know?
Yeah.
And it's been something that I've been dealing with in my life with people, trying to bring them along to just make them see that more and to act out less out of fear and more out of love, honestly.
Yeah. No, absolutely.